What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hope everybody's had a nice start to their week. It's been chaotic. Obviously, the second time that I've gone live in about 24 hours. Still kind of in shock that all of this happened. It's funny, yesterday was kind of chaotic. I was spending some time with family. We all went over to my brother's place. We had already walked out the door. Originally, I wasn't going to bring my laptop, and I just had this weird feeling in the back of my mind of, well, what if it happens today? And then you're unprepared. Ended up grabbing my stuff. Thank God that I did, because it ended up taking over my entire afternoon. But it's been a whirlwind. We had an opportunity to ask John Weber and interim head coach Tyson Summers a variety of questions at their press conference today. If you missed that, you can check that out on the CSU YouTube. I'll be posting some clips from both of those guys on the DNVR Rams Twitter. Be playing a couple of the clips on today's show as well. I have been asked by CSU to not post press conferences in their entirety anymore. So if you want to watch the entire thing, you'll have to do so via their platforms, but I will post some of the clips that I find relevant and interesting to all of you. And again, we'll play some of those on the show today as well. Just kind of starting here with my instant reaction before we get into some of the stuff that stood out from today, before I start talking about some of the potential targets for CSU to lock in on. We'll also get into some Hawaii takeaways, although at this point, I mean, it's much more about the big picture. I don't think you guys really care that much, so we won't spend as much time on that as we typically would, but a lot to get into today. If you're listening live on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, saying what's up in the Toyota chat, I certainly would appreciate it. Send your questions, comments, etc. If I don't get to it right away, our main man Dion can star those, and we can always come back around full circle later on. I'm still trying to process everything as far as who my top target would be. The fact that this all happened so suddenly, I mean, it wasn't shocking. I wrote on Sunday morning before it actually happened that it felt like we were watching the moments leading up to a car crash, like one of those dramatic videos on YouTube where, you see it in slow motion and you know what's going to come. It's just a matter of when. But I will say, given the fact that it didn't happen after San Diego State, I kind of was operating under the assumption that he'd probably just get the opportunity to ride it out. We heard from Weber today, and he talked about the timing and why he felt like now was going to be better in the long term because it sets you up better recruiting wise. It gives you an opportunity to have an exhaustive search process, but also it probably gives this staff a better chance of salvaging something this season rather than trying to do it, after the bye week. At least at this point, you'll play Wyoming. Maybe you catch them off guard, given that you're going to have some scheme changes potentially. I mean, it's the new offensive coordinator and Grant Chestnut. We found that out today. So there's going to be a lot of moving pieces here these next couple of weeks, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. We'll see how all of that plays out. As of now, the plan is for Tyson Summers to continue to call the plays defensively. And again, that'll be Grant Chestnut on the offensive side. Matt Mumme still the passing game coordinator. Bill Best still the run game coordinator. But Chestnut was at Western Kentucky with Summers a couple years ago. They've got a previously established relationship. You go and look at some of the offensive numbers that Chestnut has had as an OC in his career. They're actually pretty encouraging. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that impacts the team this year. But it's just been a wild couple of days. I'd be lying if I said that I'm not a little relieved that it happened now, because I think people get it at this point. I was a fan of Jay Norvell, the man. I think I have done a pretty good job of shooting it straight. Obviously, you can't put lipstick on a pig and tell people it's pretty, but I just feel like there were times where it just felt kind of unsettling in a sense of having to come on this show a couple times a week and not badmouth. I mean, the commentary is fair. Criticism is fair game. Like, I got to shoot it straight. But, when you like the people, them as people beyond the profession, it gets a little bit challenging at times. It just kind of wears on you. And I just wasn't looking forward to like 6 weeks of having to come on here and say the end is near, he's a good guy, and yada, yada, yada. But, the results just aren't there. I certainly wish him well. He posted a really cool tweet today in response to a Lucky Joe's tweet encouraging CSU to go win the border war. Classy through the end. But, there is a human element in all of this that is often overlooked. And it's not just about the Norvells. There's so many staffers right now who are up in limbo. I've been in that position where you don't know what your future is going to hold and whether you're going to still have a job at that school or not, and what, what is going to come. It's really challenging. And I just want to be conscious of that and kind of say that before we get into all of this. It is what it is. The results were not good enough. I think it really comes down to a couple of key games, both showdowns for sure. The Arizona Bowl, a small handful of other games, Hawaii and UNLV in 2023, Fresno in 2024. But I also think that optically, the slow starts really did not help his cause. And this year was the biggest bummer, just because you had more expectations this season off of the 8-win campaign than whether, you felt last year it was fluky or not. The reality was in year 4, it needed to really be more consistently competitive than what we had seen in the previous 3 years. And he just didn't earn those style points. I said it yesterday, just kind of felt like instead of reassuring the fans, they unfortunately, obviously not intentionally, but poured gasoline on the flames. And now we're in a precarious position. And, I don't envy the admin. This is maybe the most significant hire in CSU athletics history. The most important hire to this point was no doubt Sonny Lubick, but there's just so much at stake with the way that college football is trending, the gaps between the bigger schools and the smaller schools widening more and more. You just cannot afford to miss here. And that was a big factor in all of this too, just the pressure that's added in by the fact that you're moving to the Pac-12. And Weber said it today. It is very important for CSU to have momentum going into that Pac-12 era, because they all know how important it is to have success right now. And really what it comes down to is just not enough growth from year 2 to year 4 under Norvell. They, in some senses, regress competitively. I do think that there was some really bad injury luck this year. That's going to be part of it. I mean, football's a violent sport. Had some bad portal luck as well. But you have to be able to adjust on the fly, especially at this level, more so than ever before. I mean, it's probably never been more challenging to be a college football coach, if we are being real with ourselves. But man, it is important to get this hire right. With that in mind, here is John Weber's intro statement from his press conference this morning, kind of setting the scene. This is an attractive gig. The ambitions at CSU are high. And this is an admin who is willing to exhaust all realistic resources in pursuit of greatness. And I think that's really what's going to make this kind of an exciting time here. Is obviously there's a lot riding on this, and that's unnerving, but also it's exciting because there's hope and possibility on the table again. And that you have an admin that will do everything in their power to, at the very least, go down swinging, which is all, you really can realistically ask for. So here's John Weber's intro statement. We'll talk more about what we learned from him after that. I just talked with us for about 15 minutes. We'll play about 2-3 minutes of it here. And then I'll kind of talk about some of the other things that stood out from him. And then we'll get into some of the stuff that Tyson Summers said. But here is that intro statement from John Weber.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming by this morning. I met with Coach Norvell yesterday shortly before 1 p.m. to inform him of the change in leadership for our football program. Met with Coach Summers immediately thereafter to discuss program leadership as interim head coach, and he graciously accepted that opportunity to work with our program. Coach Norvell and I then took turns meeting with both the staff and with our players, and had good, meaningful conversations with all of them. Yesterday was a hard day for our football program. When a decision like this is made, it affects more than just the head coach and his family. It affects a lot of families. There's a lot of people on our staff. There's a lot of players in that locker room. Those players have families. It is a deeply personal thing for a lot of people when a change like this is made. There are great people in our football staff. There are great people in our locker room. And I am immensely proud of who all of them are. Coach Norvell and his wife Kim, they were great stewards of our program. They built a culture that embraced our community. I'm immensely proud of what they were able to do, and that made this decision even harder. Coach Norvell built momentum for a program that deeply needed it, resulted in an 8-win season for us last year and culminated in a bowl game, but ultimately progress was challenged and progress stalled at a very critical time for us as we ascend into the Pac-12. And with that in mind, I made the decision that we needed a different direction and different leadership as we move forward. A national search will begin immediately. We will partner with a premier search firm to do so, and we will identify the right coach to lead our program. During that search process, Coach Summers will lead our program. We will also use that time to evaluate every single square inch of our program. Coach Summers has every authority to do what he feels necessary for us to finish the season strong. I have complete faith in his ability to lead, to represent our university, and to recruit to our program, and that is about to be on display for all of you. This program is now fully focused on our game versus Wyoming on Saturday. This rivalry game and the traditions that surround it are among the absolute best in college football, and we're going to celebrate that this week. I'm excited for Coach Summers to lead us into that game and take full advantage of the upcoming bye week as well, for us to prepare to finish strong and to continue to recruit to our program. And this is a program that's seen record crowds for the last year and a half. The engagement with Rand Country is unparalleled. It's been absolutely outstanding, and I'm incredibly grateful for the way that Rand Country has showed up for us. It's a program with top-tier facilities. It's a program that represents an outstanding academic and research institution. It's a program backed by 270,000 alumni and powered by 34,000 students. It's a program located in a phenomenal city in an outstanding state. This program is primed for significant success, and this university is aligned to achieve it. I set the vision for Colorado State to become the most loved, most watched, most innovative athletics program in the West. I look forward to the process that's about to begin here to identify the leader that is going to be able to capitalize on all the potential that exists here at Colorado State, and I'm going to ensure it happens.
All right, a lot to get into there. I think he hit on a lot of the key points of why this is an intriguing position, and it goes far beyond just facilities, which are a big advantage when it comes to this kind of stuff, but it's more about institutional support. It's more about being in lockstep, as an entire institution, all the way down from the admin to whoever you're hiring. You're going to have a school who's committed to athletic excellence, and that's one of the things that's, in hindsight, incredibly frustrating. Is Sonny Lubick was able to do so many incredible things despite not really ever having a university president who was bold enough to really go all in on athletics. I mean, just imagine what they could have done had they invested properly in Sonny at the time. But I'm going to talk about what we learned from Tyson Summers. We'll talk more about what we learned from John Weber. I'll get to some of these comments in the Toyota chat. CSU fans still talking about the Travis Hunter stuff from like a couple years later. Move on with your life, man. We'll get into all of this fun stuff. Let me shout out a couple of quick partners real quick, and we'll keep the party rolling. Coors Light, our great friends encourage you to choose chill, to rise above when you're juggling work, family, the busyness of, fall. If you got kiddos that are back in school and playing sports, it just turns into chaos. As great as the weather is in Colorado, fall is chaotic, especially if you've got a family and you've got 8 million things going on, and it's just easy to lose our chill. We've all been in that spot. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you're feeling run down. Maybe you've got 8 million errands you've got to run today, and your annoying coworker just happened to set you off. Talk about trying to deal with all of this. It gets tough. I know it. You know it. We got to do what we can to choose chill, to rise above. When we put ourselves in that right state of mind, then, you've earned it. Kick back, relax, open that ice cold Coors Light. It's cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged. I had a couple of them this past weekend. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado beer. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. Toyota offers 17 models available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker. They've got 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from. The Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck is awesome. But again, Toyota SUVs really are perfect for Colorado living. Doesn't matter if you're living downtown, if you're in NoCo like me, maybe you want to head out to the slopes, maybe you want to go on some road trips up north. Whatever you're looking for, they've got something for you. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right. We'll get into some of the stuff we learned from Tyson Summers, but just kind of going through my notes here. And again, today's been a whirlwind. Press conference was from, about 11 to 12. Drive home, trying to cut all this video, get it uploaded. I don't know if you've ever tried to download a 20-minute video that you shot in 4K, but it is a process. So, I'll have to go rewatch this presser and kind of go through every little detail. We'll write about it. We'll have plenty to dive into this week. Just some of the things that stood out to me. John has continually been unapologetic with his openness in believing that CSU should be one of the top group of 5 institutions in the country. In the past, we had seen an admin really take an apathetic approach. Woe is me. What are we supposed to do? We're just widowed CSU. And it really got so old. Like, it got to a point where I was pretty much just numb to listening to Joe Parker speak, if we're being real. But I love that John doesn't shy away from any of this. He's not afraid of people throwing it back in their face. Why shouldn't CSU strive for more based on what this campus and university have to offer, based on the fact that Fort Collins is an incredible college town that year after year is voted one of the best places to live? The student support is there. The institutional support is there. The resources are there. The facilities are there. There's no reason to believe that this can't be a program that competes at the levels of a Boise State. Are you going to be, a power program, a Power 4 school, whatever? No, you're not going to be Alabama. You're not going to be, the SEC or the Big Ten. I've argued, though, that if this Pac-12 is built up right, I really don't think the gap between, some of the top teams in the Pac and the majority of, say, the Big 12 and the ACC is really that significant at this point. I would say, but Texas Tech, Arizona, Boise State are a hell of a lot more similar than, say, Texas Tech and Bama, if that makes sense. But all of that is to say, this is an attractive job. It's going to command significant interest because this is a school that is willing to swing big. As far as the finances go, Jay Norvell is going to be owed $1.5 million, according to John. I know that Tyler Shannon, great Ram fan, he pointed out online that it might be closer to like 1.24 based on some of the Nevada Norvell stuff. Admittedly, I'll have to dive into that. But yeah, roughly 1.5 million. CSU will be using a search firm, and I saw some comments in the Toyota chat mocking it, and I'll be real. I have very openly mocked the concepts search firms many times in my career. I've talked about, give me 100K, and I think every situation is different. Post Medved, the candidates were so obvious. Same thing like post Larry. It was, are you going to hire Craig Smith or are you going to hire Nico Medved? Yes, you'll talk to a couple of other people, but I mean, let's be real. Those were always the most obvious choices. I do think they ran a more exhaustive search than maybe I even anticipated for this past basketball hire. But as many jokes as I can make about search firms, I will say that the one time CSU didn't use one in the last couple of years, we ended up with Steve Adazio. So that could be the greatest selling point for cutting the check and getting some outside perspective in here. If you're going to go the other way, if you're going to be more critical, you could also argue that a lot of these search firms probably do what Urban did in the first place, which is just get their buddies and their connects hired. But from a business sense, I get why these schools do it. As CSU RAMT says here, our guy Tyler Shannon, the search firm advantage is also that they set up all the meetings to have private interviews out of the public eye. So that's also a really important factor and a great point. John mentioned that head coaching experience will be something that's certainly a bonus, but it won't be a necessity. If you remember back, that was one thing that Joe Parker did back before they hired Norvell, mentioned that somebody had to have head coaching experience. The problem with that is it kind of paints you into a box. What if you end up interviewing an incredible candidate who, passes all the tests, checks every box, other than the fact that he doesn't have the experience? It's kind of a paradox, right? Like you can't get the experience until you're given an opportunity. I like that they're going to be open to everybody, and you should cast a very wide net when it comes to all of this. There are a lot of incredible up and coming coaches. There are going to be some guys who have head coaching experience who will be into it too, though. And I just like that they're being open, I guess, and not necessarily putting parameters that potentially cause you to overlook quality candidates. And I feel like that's maybe something that's happened in the past. He also mentioned, again, like the timing of all this. I even was a little bit questioning of like, really, does this week make all that much sense? When he laid out how it kind of makes sense from a recruiting standpoint. And again, you got to factor in the upcoming bye week as well. Just the fact that you do have to coach this Wyoming game, but it kind of gives you an opportunity to more realistically go into that UNLV game and be competitive. Like that all made sense to me. But obviously, stagnation was ultimately what it came down to. Some of the other things that he talked about as far as, looking for in a coach, recruiting is going to be a big factor in it. And specifically, when you look at CSU's history, he pointed out that, when CSU has been a competitive program, historically, they've had a lot of success recruiting locally, but most certainly in Texas and Southern California. Jay and his staff checked those boxes, and I think they brought in a lot of weapons from that area, and they have some guys committed right now that fit that description. But I do think that's important to consider. That's not to say that, like, if you're some guy coming over from the Northeast or the South and you've never been in this region, that you can't have success here. But I do think it probably makes the candidates that have experience in those areas a little bit more logical to fit the profile of the job. I've been asked, do I think Tyson Summers can coach his way into landing the full-time gig? He gave a really interesting answer on that, and I'll play a clip. I asked him basically straight up, do you view this as an audition? We'll play that in a couple minutes. But Tyson, he's a smooth talker, man. Like, I think he would have to do quite a bit to realistically land the job. Like, he most certainly would have to go to a bowl. I mean, you'd have to see a pretty dramatic turnaround, but he is somebody who, in theory, does have head coaching experience. He killed the press conference today. Just as he's got the classic like Southern draw. He's a smooth talker. Here's his intro statement. We'll talk more about Tyson. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but here is Tyson Summers' intro statement from the press conference. I was really impressed with a lot of what he had to say today. Just a lot of talking about living in the moment. Not feeling too sorry for ourselves. Definitely showed some emotion talking about his relationship with Norvell and being so thankful for the opportunity here. I was I was impressed by what we saw from him today. So let's play that intro statement, and then we'll talk more about the current head coach of CSU football, Tyson Summers.
Just wanted to really, again, just thank for the opportunity here to serve from President Parsons, from John, from Scott, and the opportunity to be able to help these young men. I really feel like my role here is to be the best example of servant leadership I can be. I really want to do everything that I can do possibly to lead and to help the young men in our program the best way that I can the next couple of weeks. And the same thing goes for our staff, to our fans, and give us a great opportunity, the greatest opportunity to win over the next couple of weeks. And so, you know, I've tried to talk with them a lot the last couple of, last couple of days, I guess it feels like that. But really, you know, just about being able to hit the reset button. That's really what we've tried to talk about, just trying to get into a good habit of resetting and being able to be where your feet are and being able to be a good teammate. So those have really been kind of the messages as we've moved forward and what we've talked about with them. I had an opportunity to speak to the team yesterday afternoon. We proceeded as normal today, you know, with the opportunity to get into our meetings, get ready for Wyoming and the Border Wars games that's coming up, and met with the offense, met with the defense, met with special teams, and then had a team meeting this morning as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to really thank Jay Norvell, his wife Kim, and his son Jaden. Coach Norvell, you know, gave me an opportunity to come here, you know, after having been here 10 years ago, an opportunity to just really see what a good man and what a good coach looks like as a head coach. And, you know, the opportunity to come back means a lot to me. And I'm very appreciative of him, his family, everything that he's done for me. And again, just trying to look forward and try to continue to do the best job I can to be a good servant and to be a good role model for the players that we have and for the coaches on our staff and for our fans and for our administration. So with that, any questions?
Tyson Summers looking sharp in the blazer. I've definitely enjoyed the opportunities that I've had to speak with him. I felt like he did a good job of killing the tone today. A lot of optimistic talk. You know, he talked about hoping that the fans still have hope because there's still potential to turn this season around. That's certainly what you'd love to hear if you're a Ram fan. I think some of the talk about having to redefine what success looks like, you know, once the injuries started to add up, it was fair from Norvell, but it certainly was going to ring hollow given the fact that you came into the year boasting about being a team with championship DNA. You know, you want to hear that the goal here is still to go out and compete and find a way to have some success. I saw former CSU running back Izzy Matthews tweet out, you know, Tyson Summers does have previous success against Wyoming. They went up into Laramie in 2015, and his defense really stifled a great Wyoming rushing offense, took Brian Hill completely out of the equation. So he does have some experience in the border war, and if they were able to, you know, establish some success here over these next couple of weeks, you never know what could happen. Admittedly, I don't anticipate him getting the full-time gig. That's just my gut right now, but you never know. And it's also not just an audition, you know, here at CSU, but potentially for elsewhere or potentially to stay on as a defensive coordinator here, depending on, you know, who they bring in and what type of background that they have. But I really liked a lot of what Tyson had to say today. I liked how he was just very humble, you know, throughout it all, and you know, talking about how appreciative he is of this opportunity and just wanting to, you know, keep the focus on the now and improvement and not getting, you know, too ahead of himself and stuff like that. I do think he is a coach who has learned a lot about himself over the years. And he talked about that today, how he's proud of his scars. You know, his first tenure as a head coach did not go tremendous. And, you know, he was honest. It is a lot different as far as game day obligations go, being a head coach versus being a defensive coordinator, everything that you have to just take in at once and be able to process. I mean, it's not for everybody, but I think as far as the options on staff go, he was definitely the most logical, and we'll see what he can do. I mean, I think he said the right thing here. We'll play this clip of him, you know, and whether he views it as an audition for the job or not. But I'll be rooting for Tyson Summers. He's come off very gracious and very likable in his, you know, short times being back in Fort Collins here at CSU. But here's Tyson Summers on whether he views this interim tag as an audition for the job. I think you're going to like his answer.
Obviously, the task at hand is Wyoming. You've got a million moving parts, but you're a coach. You've got individual goals. Do you view this as an audition for the full-time job?
My goal is to make sure I do a great job with those kids today. And if I can see you into tomorrow, I'll try to see you into tomorrow. But if I try to focus on a goal that I can't control, then I'm not going to be good in the moment. And the truth of the matter is, I'm going to walk in front of 55 players on offense today and have individual meetings with them, and I've got to be great with them. I've got to make sure I can give them the energy that they need, the compassion that they need, and I hope that I'm able to give them the confidence they need to go on and do well as we finish up here. That's really going to be my focus. Again, if I'm looking at anything past being a servant leader right now and leading correctly, then I'm gonna miss the target, and I don't want to do that. I want to do this right by them and our staff and our fans and our administration each day.
Really mature stuff from Tyson Summers. Kind of a cowboy answer too. If I can, live to see it tomorrow, then I will. I loved that though. Let me shout out a couple of partners. I love to see how active the Toyota chat is. I know everybody's antsy to get into potential candidate talk, and we will do that right after this break. Whether you need a snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills, our awesome presenting sponsor, has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking to take your gear and make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. We've got ALLCITY and DNVR gear now through Branded Bills. Very, very sharp. You can get that if you want when you sign up to become a diehard. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you need. They have a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection. I've got a couple options here on set in the back. I've been wearing my camo one a ton lately. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hey, Colorado. Stop by your local Dick's Sporting Goods for the hottest apparel and footwear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, Hoka, DNVR, and more, plus score the latest equipment for baseball, football, soccer, basketball, golf, and all your tailgating essentials. If you find a lower price, they'll match it. Their best price guarantee is awesome. Get your gear fast with free curbside pickup at your nearest store or easy shipping from Dicks.com, because every season starts at Dick's. All right. Still kind of surreal that we've got Dick's Sporting Goods on brand. Again, if you see any of our gear in there, snap a photo, tweet it at us. I'd love to see it. It's just one of those that makes me shake my head and think about how far we've come through all of this. It's been nuts. And a lot of that is thanks to awesome CSU fans like you guys continuing to support us. We've got a comment here from CSU Ram T, our guy Tyler Shannon, that I think is very astute, and that is the role that Scott Sidwell will play in all of this. Tyler, CSU Ram T in the Toyota chat says, additionally, the former Penn State AD is on the Athletic Advisory Council. Frankly, not likely, but others with Penn State connections wouldn't surprise me. I don't know how much the Penn State connections are going to factor into all this. I do know that Scott Sidwell will be a major part of this whole process because he's more or less being groomed as the future athletic director for whenever, John Weber decides to step down these next couple of years. I think Weber will certainly be on board, through the transition into the Pac-12. But you got to remember, he was retired before basically taking over the green and gold guard and then becoming AD out of just pure love for CSU. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's going to want to stick around and do this, for years and years. But Sidwell is a guy who I like talking to a lot. He's been great to the media, really personable, but he is definitely going to play a big factor in all this. I am interested to see kind of what the timeline looks like. We talked about Tyson Summers. Obviously, if they're able to beat Wyoming first and foremost, and then, maybe shock UNLV or something like that, then you start talking about him realistically as an option, kind of like what we're seeing, with Tim Skipper at UCLA right now. But I do wonder, what does the timing of all this looks like? And if you're CSU, how eager are you to get this decision announced? In some sense, you want to be really thorough with your process. You want to make sure that you're exhausting all potential candidates and really taking a look at every possible option here. At the same time, you don't want to get strung along too much, because I think this is going to be one of the more chaotic coaching carousels of really all time. I mean, we're already seeing some really big jobs open up, between Florida and Penn State, but the ripple effect that's going to come from that is going to be significant. And the last thing that you want is to think you have somebody on board and then, potentially have them leverage that into an offer at a bigger school. So I think there's a lot of factors at play here. Like if you hire a current head coach, like somebody from the FCS ranks, I think you could probably just wait until right after the regular season, maybe announce it before the FCS playoffs, kind of like what New Mexico did with Jason Eck. If it's someone more like Colin Klein, for instance, where maybe you're worried about the scenario I just threw out of being leveraged for a bigger offer, my guess is you'd probably want to announce it sooner, especially given that they're probably not going to be a playoff team. We'll see, I guess. But there's a lot that's going to factor into all of this, and it could get pretty exhausting here over the next month. So just keep that in mind. Like Friday, we're going to talk about the border war. Like we can't just do here's 15 names every show for the next 6 weeks, or we're all going to get real bored. But right now, I'm down. I'm game. I've had a lot of people ask me for weeks and weeks, and out of respect, for the staff, I didn't really want to get into it, but things have changed. So let's do it. I have a list of 15 names that I put together. It's just names that I think would be logical. I mentioned yesterday that you need to take any of those lists that come from the national newsbreakers with a grain of salt, because there is a lot of agenda-driven information that comes out in this process that is not necessarily in line with the reality of what the search is looking like. Maybe they have a conversation, but how realistic is that conversation? My point is just that there's a lot of bullshit names, frankly, that get floated in this whole process. And all the names that I'm throwing out, these are names that I think just would make sense. This isn't sourced. This isn't, me saying, oh, behind the scenes, these are the guys I hear CSU wants. I think Weber is going to keep this pretty tight knit. They've been good about that. It was a lot easier for me to get info under the previous admin. Weber's great. Don't get me wrong. Like he's very willing to come on the show. He's accessible and stuff like that. I just mean the people that work under him seem to have far more respect for that process than the back in the day. We'll just put it like that. My top guy, I said yesterday, I don't know how realistic he is, but my top guy, and this is probably somewhat rooted in personal bias, is Clint Kubiak. He was one of my favorite players for CSU growing up. So again, like you got to factor that into it. I'm sure there's an element of that. My heartstrings. I grew up a diehard Denver Broncos fan. Gary Kubiak, saw him, lead the Broncos to Super Bowl 50. But even, like with him being the Broncos OC, I was a big fan of him when he went to Houston. It was like a big deal to me when I was a kid that Gary Kubiak's son was a starter for CSU. I don't really know why. It's kind of dorky, but like I was like, suck it, other local schools. Like we got a Kubiak, and he was a big time playmaker. He's gone on to be a really successful coach now in multiple NFL stints, Minnesota, New Orleans, Seattle. My gut says, especially if Seattle were to win that division, which I think they have an opportunity to, maybe he lands an NFL head coaching gig this winter, if not the next. Does he really want to make the move to college, which is a whole lot more than just coaching football? You got to be a politician, a recruiter, a fundraiser. Like there are just so many elements of the game that have absolutely nothing to do with actually being on a football field and, instructing a team or scheming and stuff like that. But based on everything I've heard about Clint behind the scenes, he's brilliant. I think he would generate a ton of excitement. I think he would be able to put together an incredible staff too, which to me is a big selling point. The lack of collegiate experience is a little bit unsettling. He has some collegiate experience, but I just mean it's not like he's been in the game the last 5 years and so much has changed. But Clint would be my top guy, just as far as like, if you put a knife to my back, hey, who would you love to see the job? It would be Clint. Colin Klein, also really high on my list, the Texas A&M offensive coordinator. I have heard that he is interested in the job. you can take that with a grain of salt. You know, his family lives in Loveland, obviously, had an awesome career at Kansas State. I had a lot of fun watching him as a college QB back in the day and rooting for him. Was it Oregon or Auburn? I might be mixing two seasons together that they played in the postseason. But I think he's somebody that would generate a lot of excitement. I think from a local recruiting standpoint, that would probably be a home run, just given his ties to the state and the fact that he spent a lot of time recruiting in Colorado when he was on the Kansas State staff. I know that some people, they hear a name like that and immediately they start worrying about how he's just going to use CSU as a stepping stone. And well, you know, if that proves to be the case, at least that means CSU is winning, because the reality is that only one coach has done that. Like I've had so much trolling, unsurprisingly, from Buffs fans, like in the YouTube comments of my show yesterday. You know, oh, CSU's always been a stepping stone. Not really. It was for Jim McElwain. Every other coach got fired. So historically, it's been a place where the expectations are higher than what the results have traditionally been. Obviously, Sonny is kind of an outlier and all that. He's proven what is possible, as has Jim McElwain in a little bit smaller scale. But it's not the easiest gig, despite all the positives that I could throw out there about, you know, facilities and institutional support and having an admin who's in line with the vision and fan support and all that kind of stuff. Facilities, it is a job that comes with some baggage. I think more so maybe than Jay Norvell anticipated. You know, I think he was a little surprised by the blowback that CSU had after an 8-win season last year. And I think that kind of stems from, again, Ram fans are just tired of seeing a program do less with more. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find a school that is comparable, you know, in terms of university size, budget wise, that does less with everything it has to offer than CSU over the last 20 years. Like, that's just been the cold, hard truth. So yeah, kind of a small tangent there, but keeping the list going. Some of my other top guys, Tim Skipper, again, somebody who I have personal biases for because he got me my job at CSU football back when I was a senior in high school. He was recruiting Jake Bennett. Jake was my buddy. We grew up together. I just happened to get to meet him during a spring game and just bombarded him with 8 million questions. You know, what are we doing here? You know, linebackers look slow. What's the offense going to look like? Like, frankly, audacious commentary that he probably should have just told me to, like, screw off. But instead, he sat there, listened to me. We had a great conversation. He found out I was coming to CSU. Ultimately said, you know, hey, like, when you get to campus, show up. We'll find you a role. Probably didn't expect me to take him up on it. But, you know, first day, freshman year, first day I get on campus, what do? Go over to the football office. He ends up getting me hooked up with a job working for Tom Millers, the director of football operations. I got to spend a bunch of time with the recruiting staff and position coaches. And I learned so much. I would not be here today had it not been for that opportunity given to me by Tim Skipper. And I want that to be on the record, because obviously when I talk about him, like, I can't help but show the guy some love. And I think that his track record of success as an interim coach now 3 different times, twice with Fresno, and now what he's done at UCLA is incredible. Jerry Neuheisel gets all the national love, and he's another name that I think you've got to consider just based on what he's doing this year. But give my man Skip some love. He is long overdue for a head coaching opportunity, and if he gets UCLA to a bowl game, given his ties to CSU, that he was here the last time CSU really did anything, and given what he's done as an interim head coach, as his track record, I think he could be a really solid option. And no, he's not the flashy guy. He's not going to be the guy you see on preseason magazines and stuff like that. But he might just be the type of ball coach that brings the type of stability and toughness. I love that he's defensive minded as well. That's kind of something, maybe that's just me putting too much into Sonny's background being defensive, but I'd like to see it because we've gone the other way so many times over the years. I kind of love the idea of going with a defensive background coach like Tim Skipper, who's been a part of a lot of winning at a lot of places, Central Michigan, Florida, Fresno State. The guy's a great ball coach, and I'm stoked to see what he's doing this year. I'm really stoked to see what he's doing. Um, I'm pretty high on Brent Vigen, the Montana State coach. Again, not a guy who is going to be a PR home run. You're not going to be on dominating the radio airwaves like CU was when they hired Dion. It's not that type of hire. It is someone who has recruited this region with a ton of success, who has Mountain West experience, who has done nothing but win at Montana State, really elevated that program to heights never seen before. They've kind of surpassed Montana as the IT program, up in Big Sky country. And that's a testament to what he's done. Another guy with a defensive background who I think could bring in some of the toughness that's just kind of been lacking with this program for the majority of the last 15 years. Like we keep trying to outflash everyone, razzle dazzle teams. And maybe we need to go the other way at this point and lean into somebody who's just, a program builder, hard nosed. Maybe it's not the sexiest brand. I'd love to see him come over with like an up and coming offensive coordinator, somebody that's, empowered and really exciting. But as far as head coaches go, current head coaches, he'd be really high on my list. I like Tim Polisak, the North Dakota State head coach as well. Not quite as much regional experience as Tim or as Brent, excuse me. But another guy who's just done nothing but have success. And I love the idea of those types of guys who have been able to do more with less, whereas CSU institutionally continues to be a program who does less with more, give those guys an opportunity with all these resources and let's see what they can do. I know we said the same thing about Jay Norvell, but here's the thing. Even though it didn't work out in the end, Jay was still a really good hire in 2021. First of all, he stabilized the program, which it desperately needed. But from a process standpoint, you have to be process oriented. I'm not trying to spew a bunch of cliches like a football coach, but it is true. If the process is correct, it sucks when the results aren't there, but you can sleep at night. You can live with yourself. This wasn't Adazio, where it never made sense. No regional ties, never been in the conference. I mean, just in no way did that hire ever make sense. Jay Norvell, he had been to 4 bowl games in 5 years, had a ton of success within your league, 2-1 against you in his career. He'd just beaten your current head coach so bad it cost him his job. Like, on paper, Jay Norvell made sense. On paper, Mike Bobo made sense. Fairchild, I get it. I think they really wanted a guy with Sunny connections based on how all of that went down at the end. I think that was more of we can kind of calm the CSU lifers down by bringing in one of our own, but he's a perfect example of why CSU ties shouldn't be the biggest priority in all of this. I mean, sure, it's a bonus when you have that, but it's far from the most important factor in all of this. Just go get a quality football coach at the end of the day. If you do want to go the CSU ties route, Tony Alford. I saw somebody in the Toyota chat, and I'm not, there's been a lot of comments since then, so I apologize for not identifying who said it, but I know somebody said, if Tony Alford wasn't an alum, would he even be on the list right now? And I think that's a fair question to point out. He's a lifer at position coach, a guy who's worked at a lot of big programs. He's revered in the college football world. You've heard a lot of great things about him. But why hasn't he been elevated at this point? Why has he been passed over so many times? And I'd like to know, realistically, outside of CSU, has he ever really been in the mix for a job like where he genuinely had a chance to land the gig? I don't know. And that's not to say that he would fail. Like, I'm not trying to put him down. I don't know Tony Alford. But I think when people put the green and gold glasses on and they look at him with hard eyes just because he's worked at big programs, I just think you could get in trouble there by focusing far too much on the fact that he's an alum. It's great if it happens. It's a fun selling point, but it's far from the most important factor in all of this. Some other names that I think would be awesome: Jay Hill, the BYU defensive coordinator, longtime head coach at Weber State. So another guy who's, done more with less. He's had a lot of success at BYU. I've heard really good things about him from those that have been around him. Kirby Moore, the Missouri offensive coordinator, I'd be intrigued by him. I just think he's due to get a head coaching gig. I wonder if he's maybe in line for a bigger one. Brian Harsin, I know PR-wise has some hurdles that you'd have to get through in terms of selling him. I think he's a good football coach, though, and I think he has a proven track record in the Mountain West. I think you could do a lot worse than him. I guess I'll just put it that way. I don't think it would be a very fun experience for me to cover him. He doesn't seem like a guy who'd be great to be around the media. But to be honest, while I would love a guy who is great to deal with, like what we had with Norvell, again, what really matters in all this is winning. Why not Jerry Neuheisel? I shared a quote on Twitter from his dad, Rick, in 2019, talking about the facilities, why this is a great gig. Could be a place where Jerry could prove himself. Maybe he lands the UCLA job later on down the line. But if, he gets CSU up to a point to where they're willing to hire him, I'll live with that. You don't want to be a revolving door having to replace your coach year in and year out. But if we nail this hire to a point that he has so much success, he's hired away in a couple of years, that'd be a massive win compared to the situation we've been in for the majority of the last decade. Marcus Arroyo is a name I saw get thrown out that I thought was intriguing. I actually thought he was a year away from figuring it out at UNLV, and maybe in the second time around could be a sneaky good hire with, experience in this league. I know we're going to the Pac-12, so it's changing slightly, but it's going to be a lot of the same schools. Arizona State offensively, they've been pretty fun under him. He's somebody to consider. And then the last couple names I'll throw out, Jason Eck of New Mexico. If you're going to go the poach a G5 coach would probably be my top choice. I just think that guy, he's got an energy to him. I think in terms of getting the fan base rejuvenated, a guy like Eck with that charismatic personality and, frankly, a track record of success. You see the way that New Mexico team has embodied his demeanor. I think Ram fans would be very into that. And the last one I'll throw out, and probably not super realistic, but a guy that I think would be a great hire if he were to be interested, Bronco Mendenhall, the Utah State coach. He was at New Mexico last year, obviously long-time BYU coach. Had some success at Virginia, wasn't super great, but I know part of why he went back to Utah is he's got family there, so maybe he wouldn't be interested in leaving. But, traditionally Utah State, they have had a lot of coaches poached because they don't invest in the same way that CSU does facility-wise. It's not even close. He's somebody I'd consider. I mean, you look at what he's doing with Bryson Barnes this year. Look at what he did with Devin Dampier at New Mexico. Like, you're talking about a guy who's had success in developing quality quarterbacks basically everywhere that he's ever been. I'd be pretty intrigued by him. We got a comment here from Taup. Who are the coaches you don't want to see? That's a great question. Now we're talking. I'm not as high on Alford as everybody else is because he's a CSU guy. I would talk myself into it if he were to get the gig. I'd give him an opportunity, obviously. Gruden, although I think he's a great football mind and would be a lot of fun content-wise, the lack of collegiate experience would have me pretty worried. I mean, look at what's happening with Bill Belichick. Look what happened with Urban in the NFL. There's just not a lot, even Saban, my hero, there's not a lot of examples of having success when you've really been a lifer on pro football or college football and you're trying to go the other way. Mike Gundy, I can't even believe that we have to even talk about that. Napier, I don't think makes a ton of sense. I do think he's a good football coach, and what he did at Louisiana Lafayette, was it, or whatever, was impressive. And then the Sun Belt back in the day, everything I've heard behind the scenes is he really hated being at CSU, and that certainly matches like his vibe from what I'd seen. But who knows? But I don't like these names of guys who were great 15 years ago, and just because you were at a big school, like, to me, I don't care. I'm more inclined to go the other way if we're being real. The FCS coaches, the guys who have been able to do more with less, because I think you need a real program builder, and I think you need somebody who can be very malleable in all this. Second time in a row, we've gotten that word on the pod. Big brain JTM, baby. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes when I use words like that in real time, I criticize myself in the back of my brain. Like, all right, quit being a douche. Just being real with you. Yeah, I mean, I'm not super high on Sam Pittman of Arkansas, as Lamar's saying. Like, I'd be intrigued by him more so than Gundy. Like, I think Pittman's an example of a good coach at a place where the expectations are probably unrealistic. But I think you could do better than him. And I think when you factor in the cost to a guy like Pittman's going to cost you a couple $1 million. Like, if you could get a Brent Vegan, for instance, for like $1 million, like, to me, that's a more appealing route. Cost is a factor in all of this when you're a school of CSU size, because you don't want to overpay. You want a good coach, but especially in the rev share era, like, some of these teams that have the bloated coaching salaries are going to find out it's really not. It's not all that it's cut out to be always. So you got to keep that in mind. All right. But before we get out of here, I did want to just give a couple of Hawaii takeaways, because while we are going to talk a lot about the big picture, we do still have 5 football games left, and we've got the biggest game of the season coming up on Saturday in the Border War. I intend on being in Laramie for that one. I've been at every Border War up there since 2013. So got a pretty good streak little going here. It's a big one. I understand that this season has kind of been chaos, and we're all still trying to process what's been going on, but I'm a romantic when it comes to tradition and history, but this game matters more to me than any other game. And for those that have been in the locker room, for those that have played in this type of game, I know how much it means to them. You've seen Kyle Bell tweet it. You've seen Izzy Matthews tweet it. Nothing else matters right now. It's fuck Wyoming. It's get that bronze boot and bring it back to Fort Collins, where it belongs. It has spent far too much time up north over the last decade. If that's going to happen, though, and we'll talk more in depth about this on Friday, the Rams have got to be able to run the football. Like, there are so many little things I could get into, and I have a bunch in my notes, but just for time's sake, we'll give the expedited synopsis here. But you're not going to be able to win when you're averaging 2.4 yards per carry, not with what this passing offense is. And I guess we'll see if there are any changes to the passing offense, given that you have a new play caller. Do you consider going back to Braden Fowler-Nicolosi at this point? We'll see. But CSU's first 7 drives resulted in 6 punts and a fumble. It was unwatchable. It was anemic. It was just awful. I can't do it anymore. And you're going up against an incredible run defense, so it's going to be a challenge. We'll see what Grant Chestnut is able to do. You need a hot start, man. Like, it was the exact opposite of the Fresno State game in the sense that you receive the kick, you go 3 and out, and then immediately allow Hawaii to go down for a touchdown. It just kind of felt like a bad omen. Like, the result that we got was inevitable based on how that played out. If CSU was going to win that game, kind of felt like they had to jump off to a hot start. Credit the way that they fought back into it in the end, obviously gave themselves an opportunity, but just couldn't get off the field enough defensively and couldn't sustain drives offensively. Hawaii converted 50% of their third downs in the game. Also the biggest fourth down. They break off that touchdown run at the end. But if CSU can't run the ball, if they can't protect the quarterback better either, like, the passing offense has been ugly, but if the line is going to struggle in pass pro the way that they did, I don't really know what you're going to be able to do to improve it. They had 6 sacks. CSU had 0. Hawaii had 8 tackles for loss. CSU had 1. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand why this game played out the way that it did. Hawaii, 10 more minutes of possession. They had it for 10 minutes in the first quarter alone. I mean, they really set the tone. I know that CSU technically fought back into it, but it really never felt like the game was truly in danger for Hawaii, if we're being real. The Rams got to tackle better defensively too, man. 144 yards after the catch for Hawaii. A couple of broken plays, couple of missed coverage assignments. Maybe that was due to CSU getting too cute. Norvell talked about on Saturday night really changing a lot defensively and trying to match up with Hawaii. I'd like to see CSU trying to impose their own will and getting teams to adjust to them, and instead of CSU trying to always be the chameleon that adjusts to everybody else. But maybe that's an ignorant take from a podcast host who's oversimplifying things. I'll certainly admit that that's a possibility. Yeah, that's basically all I've got for today. A couple of helmet stickers, Javion Kennard, Armani Winfield, Jay Spella, 3 picks in 2 games. That's one of the cool stories this season. Make sure that you're keeping up with us all week. I've got a lot to get into. We'll be talking about the coaching search. We'll talk more about candidates in depth. I'll write about it. I will obviously set the scene for Wyoming, but this week it is all about that boot. Hang on. Look what we got here. Oh. All about the boot, baby. All that matters for the rest of the season. Beating Wyoming, beating Air Force. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.